Hello everyone, it's Steamberg Avenue, I'm Eric. Welcome to Epic Universe Reviews, a series of videos reviewing each of the 11 rides at the all-new Universal's Epic Universe theme park at Universal Orlando Resort. In each video, I will talk through my experience on one of the rides, provide useful information about it, and give some final thoughts on how good the ride is. For the 6th video in this series, I am reviewing Curse of the Werewolf, a MACK Rides family spinning coaster in the Dark Universe area of the park. Spoilers incoming. My last 2 reviews were of Stardust Racers and Monsters Unchained, 2 of my favorite Epic Universe rides. This review will be breaking that positivity cycle. In all honesty, I did not care for Curse of the Werewolf. I've established in other reviews that I prefer roller coasters to any other type of ride, so I went in expecting a pretty fun time on this. Unfortunately, I came off quite disappointed. This ride is not necessarily bad, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that Curse of the Werewolf fails at nearly everything it tries to do. So in this review, I will talk about my experience in the ride, and explain why regardless of your preference for roller coasters, theming, or anything else, you should lower your expectations for this ride. Let's start with the entrance experience. Walking up to this coaster, you'll likely find it to be the least impressive of the Epic Universe coasters, but it's still fine by most amusement park standards. I like how close the first overbank turn gets to the main path, and that first launch and final hill going over the path are pretty fun to see. The main issue here is the nets. This ride is very compact and close to the main walkway, so there are enormous nets on either side of the track at practically all times. This was not something I had really thought about while riding, but while observing the coaster from the main path, they definitely make the ride less visually appealing. Additionally, the nets are so tall that you can see them from Celestial Park before you even approach Dark Universe. I'm intrigued by the nets being so grand and obstructive. Hiccup's Wing Gliders also has nets, but they are much smaller and they don't extend above the track. They're also mildly themed, having a bit of a dragon wing pattern to them, so I want to know if these nets were added due to legal requirements, or if the park intentionally chose to add them. I don't think they ruined the ride's appearance, but this might be the only roller coaster I've done with its excessive level of netting. Maybe they're trying to catch a werewolf. Anyway, next up is the queue, and I kind of dislike it. The appearance is not bad in a vacuum. The muted colors are stylish enough, and I enjoy the cart structure with that wolf bust on it at the very start. In the queue, you have some details that help you understand that these tents belong to fortune tellers or similar, and that's done okay. It's definitely the least interesting queue in the park in my opinion though, even disregarding my issues with the theme itself. If this queue was at a Busch Gardens park, it wouldn't be anywhere close to the best. And those parks have way less money behind them. In fact, Busch Gardens Tampa already has a MACK Ride spinning coaster called Cobra's Curse. I'll be drawing many comparisons between these 2 rides throughout the review, but let's start with their queues. Cobra's Curse's queue is better, not only for the aesthetics and atmosphere, but also how well it fits in the theme land, and how well its story is presented. In terms of fitting in the land, Cobra's Curse is in the Egypt area of the park. It's surrounded by ruins, and the Snake King statue and elaborate excavation site themed queue fit super well. It works thematically and looks great. Curse of the Werewolf's queue looks fine, but its color palette and architecture feel out of place in Darkmoor. Other major structures here include an enormous castle and a flaming windmill, both having consistently dark colors and elaborate architecture. Werewolf's loading platform and props at the entrance sign feel at home in Darkmoor, but the rest of it seems off. It looks like a rundown circus, which leads into the other major issue with the queue. Cobra's Curse tells a story within the queue in a much better way than Werewolf. The architecture of Cobra's Curse clearly resembles an Egyptian tomb, and the props and signs indicate that the tomb is being excavated. There are also signs made to look like notes stuck on the tomb, explaining how a curse was awoken and the villainous Snake King has returned. If that's not enough, there's a room with a sort of animated pre-show, showing how Egyptians worshipped the Snake King in the past, but when they asked for more resources, he lashed out and killed them. Now, he's back. This story is simple, but the queue clearly paints a connection between the Snake King and the excavation site. It is clear that the Snake King returned because of excavators disturbing the tomb. We are riding in excavation vehicles, and things go awry when the Snake King attacks. That makes sense, and good queues should be able to draw a connection between the ride's main villain and the reason the riders are there in the first place. Monsters Unchained does the same thing. It's clear based on the queue and pre-show that Victoria is trying to control the monsters and we're there to see it live. It makes sense, and everything in the queue points to the story being about capturing monsters. Curse of the Werewolf fails in this regard because the whole time while I was in the queue, I was asking myself, What does this have to do with werewolves? There are some werewolf features here. I mentioned that bust at the start, and the screen showing a full moon above the loading station does give a good indication about werewolves being active, but everything else seems unrelated. Initially, I thought this theme was a circus, and maybe in most Universal stuff the werewolf is at a circus and escapes, and I thought maybe that's what was going on. That thought didn't change until I saw the fortune-telling cards on one table. Even once I saw those, I don't recall seeing the mystics, which is the term for the fortune-tellers in this ride, ever being mentioned by name, and I didn't know they were called that until I saw a review of the ride later that day. On Cobra's Curse, the name of the excavation company is all over the queue. There's no confusion on that ride, and the detail of the excavation company name is way less important than the name of the fortune-tellers. The reason for that is that without knowledge of the fortune-tellers, I have no idea why they are even here. What is their connection to the werewolf, and why is there nothing in the queue to show their connection? There is some storytelling that clears this up a bit on the ride, but that's an issue I'll talk about later. Personally, given how confusing and tonally clashing this mystic theme is, I wish the ride was themed to entering an abandoned house in the forest of Darkmoor and encountering a werewolf there. The loading platform looks like it could have been that theme with no changes, and I do like its design a lot. However, it creates one more small issue for the queue. It's a nitpick and I only just now thought of it, but why did the Mystics set up temporary tents right outside of a permanent shack? That seems kinda weird to me. But that is the one complaint that's small enough to not influence my opinion of the queue. Overall, while the Mystics might be a known thing for Universal Monster fans, and therefore appeal to them, I think this queue is underwhelming for the average Universal fan that likes theming, and is nonsensical and uninspired for pretty much any park goer. There's clearly supposed to be a story and it just wasn't really told. But it is sort of told on the ride, so let's finally move on to the ride experience. This ride has been criticized for many reasons, and I have my own complaints to throw into the ring. This ride is a compact spinning coaster that begins with a launch, features a backwards section after you don't clear a turn, then you launch forward again, and you complete the layout. There are some theming elements in the middle, and it ends with a scene with the mystic leader, Maleva. That's about it for what happens, so let's talk about the issues. First, I will offer a bit of positivity in this review, as I address two of the ride's biggest criticisms that I actually disagree with. The first is that the ride is short in duration. Objectively, that's true. The whole thing is over in just about a minute. However, I don't think the ride feels like it's over too quickly. The ride clearly was fit into a very, very small area, and I think they got about as much mileage out of that as they possibly could. Props to the designers for that. Additionally, the show scene with the backwards gimmick helps extend the ride's duration in a very fun way. This scene is without a doubt the highlight of the ride for me. It's not thrilling, but it's the kind of amusement I expect from a family coaster like this. The theme shack has gotten flack for being underwhelming in appearance, and having somewhat poor presentation of the werewolf statues. Many say they don't actually see the werewolves while on the ride, so if you want to see them, here's my tip. There are 2 werewolves, and each one is above either entrance of the shack from the track perspective. If you look above the track where you came from or where you're going, that is where you'll see the werewolves. I saw one werewolf as the train was going backwards, and the other as the train was finally clearing the turn. I like that there are werewolves on either side, so you're more likely to see them. Additionally, since you probably will only see one wolf at a time, you can pretend there's only one there and he's just jumping from side to side to mess with you and get multiple scares. The audio cue as you enter the house each time is a lot of fun, and I think this whole scene is done alright. Its theme at least makes sense for a werewolf ride, and I do kind of have a blast during this section. Others might not, but I actually do like it. So that's it for compliments. I now have 2 other major complaints that I must bring up. The first one you might have already heard about, and that is that the ride does not spin much. This is not a guaranteed issue. I know Poseidon Entertainment mentioned getting plenty of spinning on the ride, and he even gave the ride a positive review because of the spinning. It's about the weight distribution, and I guess my ride was just not distributed right because I didn't get much spinning at all. There was some spinning, but in my experience, a spinning coaster with a little spinning is the perfect storm of awfulness. It's just enough that you can't actually feel the wind in your face or the forces of the ride, but it's also too little for the spinning to be disorienting or fun. The result is a very boring roller coaster experience, only made worse by the track layout. I think this layout is just not built right for a spinning coaster. Let's talk about another spinning coaster. the Pandemonium clones at Six Flags parks made by Gerstlauer. These are less themed than Curse of the Werewolf, and they don't have any launches or backward stuff, but they have much tighter turns and smaller ride vehicles, lending themselves to far more intense spinning. I found myself spinning on the final brake run like crazy for an extended period on these rides, and I would take any Six Flags spinning coaster over Curse of the Werewolf for that reason. Granted, Cobra's Curse definitely spins less than the Gerstlauer ones, and it is by the same manufacturer as Curse of the Werewolf. So Cobra's Curse does not necessarily have a better spinning coaster layout, but it has a much better family coaster layout. The ride begins with an elevator lift like you're on a tour of the excavation site to see that Snake King statue. Then there's a fully forward section, then a backward section, then the final spinning section. The spinning section is quite similar to Curse of the Werewolf in terms of thrill, but it feels so much faster and way more fun. This section is mostly overbanked turns, like Werewolf, but the train dives underground into somewhat themed tunnels, soars over the path, and it just helps elevate it from being a below average spinning coaster to one of the top family spinners. The final section is also longer than the final section for Werewolf, and the full ride experience just feels so complete and enjoyable through and through. Also, I definitely get more spinning in general on Cobra's Curse, but that could be luck. What's not luck is Cobra's Curse having a better layout, better theming, and finally, a better ending. Cobra's Curse has a completely unthemed ending area with a speaker that says, "There is no escape from the Cobra's Curse." That's technically not a great ending, but it's somehow way better than Curse of the Werewolves. At that point of that ride, you pull up to a large poster that does not fit with the rugged, old-fashioned vibe of the shack and queue at all. A bunch of random crates and lanterns sit around, and a mannequin of the not even really character Maleva is also there. There's a speaker next to her that doesn't say anything, and you just kind of sit there looking at the garish theming until you exit the ride. This sorry theming is somehow sadder than the unthemed Cobra's Curse ending, really proving that doing a job halfway can be worse than not doing it at all. But you know what the funniest part is? I mentioned that the speaker next to Maleva doesn't work. Well, I learned from POVs that it is actually supposed to say something. On my ride, it didn't happen, despite literally being a speaker with no other moving part to be in sync with. But there should be audio at the start and end of the ride. At the start, she says something along the lines of "Beware, the werewolf is on the prowl," and at the end she says, "You've been bitten! The moon is no longer your friend." There is music playing for the second part, and I actually did hear the music. So how was there music playing but not the dialogue? What I liked most about the speaker not working for me though, is that Maleva didn't say anything, and I can assume that I was not bitten and therefore survived the ride. That's awesome for me. But man, the one moment that connects the mystics to the werewolves was not present on my ride, and that's ridiculous. Additionally, in my Monsters Unchained review I praised the voice acting that gave the attraction so much life, and I unfortunately can't do that here. The way her lines are spoken, they sound as if every word was done in a different take. It's unnatural, kind of like this entire ending room. But fortunately, that is the end of Curse of the Werewolf. Overall, you probably think I hate this ride after all that stuff I said. But I don't. It's just a mediocre spinning coaster with a fun gimmick in the middle of the ride. The reason I'm so hard on it, especially the theming, is that Universal is renowned for taking well-known ride models and adding creative flair that makes the experience far more memorable and unique to Universal. Their rides often have great cues, engaging stories, and stunning appearances to make them stand out. Even the less talked about rides like Dragon Racer's Rally at Epic Universe do a good job of making a clone ride model feel at home at a Universal park. This ride just doesn't feel right at all, save for that middle scene with the werewolf. Cobra's Curse is a better ride in every way, unless you get lucky with the spinning on Curse of the Werewolf. This is not the worst ride at Epic Universe, but it's so frustrating that the things that could have made the ride stand out from other spinning coasters were so poorly done, if done at all. I know plenty of people had a fun time on this ride, so maybe the spinning is generally a lot better than what I experienced. If I got great spinning, I'd definitely like the ride a lot more, and I'd probably be less hard on it. However, no matter how good the spinning is, the ride still fails as a themed experience from start to finish, and is frankly one of the biggest misfires I've seen at Universal in a long while. To end this review, I will be giving the ride a number score out of 10. A 1 means it is among the absolute worst of Universal attractions like Fast and Furious Supercharged, A 10 means it is among the absolute best of Universal attractions, such as Velocicoaster or Spider-Man. Those scores are just my opinion, as is a score for Curse of the Werewolf. Because it is still a fine family coaster and has moments I enjoy, I was considering giving it a 6 out of 10. However, the more I think about the way the ride is presented, the more I realize there are things I dislike about the ride that counteract the things I especially enjoyed. For that reason, I am giving Curse of the Werewolf a 5 out of 10. If you enjoy the ride, good for you, I'm really happy you do. There are definitely worse rides in the park, but there are none I dislike as much as this one. At the very least, its flawed nature makes it a lot of fun to talk about. Thank you for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this review and that you at least learned something from it. Please comment down below your thoughts on Curse of the Werewolf, and stay tuned for the rest of the Epic Universe reviews. Subscribe so you know when they come out. I'll see you next time.